Video, we will look at the next security concept, that is AAA. AAA is the short form that is used for four security concepts: identification, authentication or authenticity, authorization, accounting or accountability. These four concepts are together known by the name AAA. Now, AAA is a concept that is related to access control. Now, let us see what is access control. To understand access control, let us just refer to the diagram that is given here. Here we have a user who's called as a subject, and this user is trying to access some files on a file server. So the file server is the object. So when a subject is trying to connect with an object, there is a flow of information between the subject and the object. This flow of information is termed as access. And the mechanisms that we put in place to control this flow of information is termed as access control. So under the concept of access control, we have AAA, and under AAA, we have the four sub-concepts. Let us start with identification. In a networked environment, we have multiple subjects trying to access object. So when multiple subjects are trying to access an object, it is essential to differentiate one subject from another subject, and that is why identification is important. So practically speaking, for identification, we use usernames. Using usernames, one person is identified and differentiated from the next subject. Then we have authentication or authenticity. Authentication is the mechanism using which we confirm the identity of a subject. Let us say there is a user who's logging into an operating system using a username. So when the user is submitting the username, how does the operating system know that this username actually belongs to this user itself? That is where authentication comes to play. An example of authentication is the use of passwords. Password is used to confirm that this is the actual user, or the user who is submitting the username is the actual owner of that particular username. And another aspect related to authentication is we are receiving a communication from somebody, and the communication says it is coming from A. How do we know it is actually coming from A and it is not coming from somebody else who is pretending to be A? So again, in this case also, we need authentication in order to confirm the identity of the subject. Then we have the concept of authorization. After identification and authentication is over, the user is able to access a particular object. And when the user is trying to open a particular file, so here the file is the object. When the user is trying to open the file, now the question is, what permissions or privileges does the user or the subject have over the object? So the permissions and privileges a subject is having over an object is determined by authorization. So authorization is the principle, or it is the concept or security concept that determines what permissions and privileges a particular subject has over a particular object. So practically speaking, whether the user is having read permission or modify permission on that particular file, or whether the user is able to access the file at any time of the day, or whether the access is restricted to a particular time period, all these things are established using the concept of authorization. The last concept is accountability or accounting. Now, why do we need accountability? Accountability is required for two reasons. Number one, to bill the customer, we have to track what the customer is doing. That is one requirement. The second requirement is, let us say we have a security issue. Once the security issue has occurred, We want to know how it happened and who's responsible for it. So that is the second reason where we need accountability. So accountability means we have the user who is a subject trying to access a file on this particular file server. So the activities of the user on this particular file server, it has to be tracked. And the details of what, so tracking, that is called as auditing. And the details of the activities of the user, it has to be captured into a log file, that is called as logging. And this log file will be monitored to understand what has happened or how much time a particular user has used something. So accountability or accounting actually consists of three sub-concepts: auditing, logging, and monitoring. Each of these concepts we will discuss in detail one by one in the coming videos. Now, what is given in this slide is a few examples of subjects and objects. So how do we differentiate between a subject and an object? Subject will request for information and object will provide information. So typically subjects are users, programs, processes, services, computers, etc. And objects, files, databases, again computers, programs, processes, services, etc. So you can see certain things like programs, processes, services, computers, they are both classified as subject and object. That is because when a computer is requesting for information, it becomes a subject, and when a computer is providing information to a subject, it becomes an object. So to identify a subject and object, we can use this particular rule. Anything that is requesting for information is a subject, and anything that is providing information is termed as an object. So I hope the concepts that we have discussed here are clear to you. Thank you all for watching this video.